Chapter 26 of the Eustace Diamonds. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Catherine Millward. The Eustace Diamonds by Anthony Trollope. Chapter 26. Mr. Gowran is very funny. Frank Greystock certainly went over to Portray too often, so often that the pony was proved to be quite necessary. Miss Macnulty held her tongue and was gloomy, believing that Lady Eustace was still engaged to Lord Fawn, and feeling that in that case there should not be so many visits to the rocks. Mr. Gowran was very attentive, and could tell on any day to 5 minutes how long the two cousins were sitting together on the seashore. Arthur Herriot, who cared nothing for Lady Eustace, but who knew that his friend had promised to marry Lucy Morris, was inclined to be serious on the subject, but, as always the case with men, was not willing to speak about it. Once, and once only, the two men dined together at the castle, for the doing of which it was necessary that a gig should be hired all the way from Prestwick. Herriot had not been anxious to go over, alleging various excuses, the absence of dress clothes, the calls of Stone and Toddy, his bashfulness, and the absurdity of paying 15 shillings for a gig. But he went at last, constrained by his friend, and a very dull evening he passed. Lizzie was quite unlike her usual self, was silent, grave, and solemnly courteous. Miss Macnulty had not a word to say for herself, and even Frank was dull. Arthur Herriot had not tried to exert himself, and the dinner had been a failure. "You don't think much of my cousin, I dare say," said Frank, as they were driving back. "She is a very pretty woman." "And I should say that she does not think much of you." "Probably not." "Why on earth wouldn't you speak to her? I went on making speeches to Miss Macnulty on purpose to give you a chance. Lizzie generally talks about as well as any young woman I know. But you had not a word to say to her, nor she to you." "Because you devoted yourself to Miss whatever her name is." "That's nonsense," said Frank. "Lizzie and I are more like brother and sister than anything else. She has no one else belonging to her, and she has come to me for advice, and all that sort of thing. I wanted you to like her." "I never like people, and people never like me. There is an old saying that you should know a man 7 years before you poke his fire. I want to know persons 7 years before I can ask them how they do. To take me out to dine in this way was of all things the most hopeless." "But you do dine out in London." "That's different. There's a certain routine of conversation going, and one falls into it. At such affairs as that, this evening one has to be intimate, or it is a bore. I don't mean to say anything against Lady Eustace. Her beauty is undeniable, and I don't doubt her cleverness." "She is sometimes too clever," said Frank. "I hope she is not becoming too clever for you. You've got to remember that you're due elsewhere, old fellow?" This was the first word that Herriot had said on the subject, and to that word Frank Greystock made no answer. But it had its effect, as also did the gloomy looks of Miss Macnulty, and the not unobserved presence of Mr. Andy Gowran on various occasions. Between them they shot more grouse, so the keeper swore, than had ever been shot on these mountains, before Herriot absolutely killed 1 or 2 himself, to his own great delight, and Frank, who was fairly skilful, would get 4 or 5 in a day. There were excursions to be made, and the air of the hills was in itself a treat to both of them. Though Greystock was so often away at the castle, Herriot did not find the time hang heavily on his hands, and was sorry when his fortnight was over. "I think I shall stay a couple of nights longer," Frank said, when Herriot spoke of their return. The truth is, I must see Lizzie again. She is bothered by business, and I have to see her about a letter that came this morning. You needn't pull such a long face. There's nothing of the kind you're thinking of." "I thought so much of what you once said to me about another girl that I hope she, at any rate, may never be in trouble." "I hope she never may on my account," said Frank. "And what troubles she may have, as life will be troublesome, I trust that I may share and lessen." On that evening Harriet went, and on the next morning Frank Greystock again rode over to Portray Castle. But when he was alone after Harriet's departure, he wrote a letter to Lucy Morris. He had expressed a hope that he might never be a cause of trouble to Lucy Morris, and he knew that his silence would trouble her. There could be no human being less inclined to be suspicious than Lucy Morris. Of that Frank was sure. But there had been an express stipulation with Lady Fawn that she should be allowed to receive letters from him, and she would naturally be vexed when he did not write to her. So he wrote: "Portray Cottage, September 3rd, 18. Dearest Lucy, we have been here for a fortnight shooting grouse, wandering about the mountains, and going to sleep on the hillsides. You will say that there never was a time so fit for the writing of letters, but that will be because you have not learned yet that the idler people are, the more inclined they are to be idle. We hear of Lord Chancellors writing letters to their mothers every day of their lives, but men who have nothing on earth to do cannot bring themselves to face a sheet of paper. I would promise that when I am Lord Chancellor I would write to you every day, were it not that when that time comes I shall hope to be always with you. And, in truth, I have had to pay constant visits to my cousin, who lives in a big castle on the seaside, 10 miles from here, over the mountains, and who is in a peck of troubles. In spite of her prosperity, one of the unhappiest women, I should say, that you could meet anywhere. You know so much of her affairs that without breach of trust I may say so much. I wish she had a father or a brother to manage her matters for me, but she has none, and I cannot desert her. Your Lord Fawn is behaving badly to her, and so, as far as I can see, are the people who manage the Eustace property. Lizzie, as you know, is the most tractable of women, and altogether I have more to do in the matter than I like. Riding 10 times backwards and forwards so often over the same route on a little pony is not good fun, but I am almost glad the distance is not less. Otherwise I might have been always there. I know you don't quite like Lizzie, but she is to be pitied. I go up to London on Friday, but shall only be there for 1 or 2 days, that is, for 1 night. I go almost entirely on her business, and must, I fear, be here again, or at the castle, before I can settle myself either for work or happiness. On Sunday night I go down to Bobsborough, where, indeed, I ought to have been earlier. I fear I cannot go to Richmond on the Saturday, and on the Sunday Lady Fawn would hardly make me welcome. I shall be at Bobsborough for about 3 weeks, and there, if you have commands to give, I will obey them. I may, however, tell you the truth at once, though it is a truth you must keep very much to yourself. In the position in which I now stand as to Lord Fawn, being absolutely forced to quarrel with him on Lizzie's behalf, Lady Fawn could hardly receive me with comfort to herself. She is the best of women, and as she is your dear friend, nothing is further from me than any idea of quarrelling with her. But, of course, she takes her son's part, and I hardly know how all allusion to the subject could be avoided. This, however, dearest, need ruffle no feather between you and me, who love each other better than we love either the Fawns or the Lizzies. Let me find a line at my chambers to say that it is so and always shall be so. God bless my own darling. Ever and always your own, F. G. On the following day